They thought firing me would end everything, but they had no idea what I still had in my hands. Not anger, not fear, proof. And when I pressed send, the entire company, from the boardroom to the break room, watched their own secrets go public. That's when I realized the slap wasn't the scandal. The silence was. My name is Danielle. I'm 31 years old and I work in a mid-sized insurance firm outside Nashville. And this is the story of how a slap in the break room became my turning point. Before I continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. It started on a Thursday. You know the kind, fogged up windows, the air conditioner cycling between too cold and too dead, fluorescent lights humming like trapped bees. Someone had left the microwave door open again, and the scent of reheated fish clung to the walls like punishment. The place looked normal, like any Thursday in a building that forgot what sunlight felt like. Phones ringing, keyboards tapping, and the faint murmur of gossip that traveled faster than email. I'd just poured myself a lukewarm cup from the bottom of the decanter when I heard my name. Brad's voice, sharp, close. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" The tone wasn't loud, but it carried. Conversations around us softened, stuttered, and then went quiet altogether. I turned. He was closer than he should have been, close enough that I could see the tremor in his jaw and the sweat gathering near his temple. His tie hung crooked, his sleeves rolled up unevenly like he'd pulled at them in frustration. Behind him, Jessica froze mid-sip of her green smoothie, her eyes darting between us. Mark sat at one of the tables with his lunch, a plastic fork halfway to his mouth, motionless. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Brad, not here. I tried to steady my tone, low enough for him to reconsider. He stepped in closer. The scent of his cologne, spicy, chemical, the one he'd started wearing after his promotion, hit me like static. "You really want to play that game?" he said, voice pitched like a threat wrapped in disbelief. And before I could take another breath, his hand cut through the air. The slap cracked across my cheek. Not once, but in echoes. It was a sound that didn't belong in an office, the sharp collision of skin, the gasp that followed, the clatter of Mark's fork hitting the floor. My cheek burned. My body wanted to flinch, to react, to do anything that looked human. But I didn't. I kept my feet planted, my fingers still around the coffee cup. The heat spread from my cheek down my neck, but I didn't touch it. I looked at him. I met his eyes and I smiled, because I knew what that slap really was. It wasn't humiliation, it was confirmation. A gift. I stepped past him slowly, my heels soft against the linoleum, and walked into the hallway. Every sound felt exaggerated. The buzzing lights, the faint hiss of the air vent, the murmur of voices behind me trying to process what they'd just seen. I kept walking until I reached the small alcove near the copier where the signal was strongest. I pulled out my phone. The folder was already open. One button. Send. That folder had taken me 3 months to build. 3 months of pretending to be patient, polite, cooperative. 3 months of keeping receipts instead of keeping quiet. I'd saved screenshots from Slack messages, threats disguised as feedback, late-night comments he'd delete before morning. I'd saved audio recordings of whispered confrontations by the elevator, the kind where he'd block the door and call it a quick chat. I had email threads where he'd blamed his mistakes on interns, shifted deadlines, made me the fall guy for his missed targets, and 2 pieces of video footage, one from the copy room where he'd cornered a new analyst, one from the hallway by accounting, where he'd spoken too close to another woman, his hands gesturing sharp and possessive. HR had told me the same thing every time. "We'll look into it, Danielle, but without clear evidence." Well, now they had evidence, and a break room full of witnesses, and a camera in the ceiling that caught every second. I watched the screen flash sent. Then I tucked my phone away, smoothed my blouse, and walked back toward my desk. My cheek still pulsed, red and hot, but the heat wasn't from shame. It was satisfaction disguised as calm. I sat down, logged into my computer, checked the insurance claim reports due that afternoon. My reflection in the monitor showed a faint mark on my face, already fading. I didn't hide it, didn't explain. For hours, no one spoke to me. The air felt heavy, thick with the kind of silence that waits for something to break. At 3:12 p.m., I heard it. Footsteps, quick, deliberate, hard-soled, 3 sets. The head of HR, a junior representative with a clipboard, and Max from security. I didn't turn around right away. I could hear the pause when they reached the break room door. The hush that followed. Then, the muffled exchange. "Brad, we need you to come with us. Now." I looked over the partition just in time to see Jessica freeze. She was sitting beside him, pretending to review documents, her smoothie long gone but still in her hand. Brad's confusion registered first, brows up, a half smile like he thought it was a prank. "You're joking, right? What is this?" Max's tone cut clean. "Let's not make this harder than it already is." Brad looked at me then, just for a second. I met his stare, gave him nothing. The HR rep spoke again, firm, rehearsed. "We've reviewed the evidence. It's not up for debate." He started to talk. Of course he did, but his eyes caught the folder in her hand, the printed screenshots, the timestamps, the camera stills. The color drained from his face in real time. His jaw worked like he wanted to form another excuse, but his throat wouldn't cooperate. Watching him unravel didn't make me happy. It made me still. The kind of stillness that comes after you've been holding your breath for too long and finally exhale. They escorted him out at 3:24. The door to the main hallway closed, and a subtle wave of air rolled through the room as if the building itself had released tension. Someone near accounting whispered something like, "Is he gone?" Another answered softly, "Yeah." By 3:30, emails started pinging across the floor. HR announcements, meeting cancellations, sudden reassignments, the usual corporate ritual after a public disaster. People avoided my gaze, but every time someone passed my desk, their glance lingered for a second too long. I kept typing, quiet, focused. The rhythm of the keyboard steadied me. When the clock hit 5, I packed my bag slowly. The smell of coffee had cooled into something metallic. The janitor had already started vacuuming near reception. Outside, the sky had turned a pale gold, fading into gray. In the parking lot, the world was still. I sat in my car, engine off, keys in my lap. My cheek tingled faintly, the last trace of that moment. I touched it lightly, not in pain, but in acknowledgement. A mark. Not his. Mine. The line I'd drawn. Quietly, deliberately. I thought about all the mornings I'd sat in that same parking lot, trying to summon the strength to walk in. All the nights I'd cried on the way home because of one more whisper, one more misunderstanding, one more time being told to stay professional. Tonight, for the first time in months, I wasn't rehearsing how to survive tomorrow. I was imagining how to rebuild it. The cicadas had started singing in the trees beyond the lot. The sky darkened over the Tennessee horizon, and the office windows reflected only the glow of my headlights. I watched the building for a long time, its rows of fluorescent rectangles flickering out one by one until only the security lights remained. That slap was supposed to break me. It didn't. It finished me. Or maybe, finally, it freed me. People assumed the story ended there. They assumed HR walking him out was the climax, the closure, the victory. But it wasn't. It was only the opening move. Because the real fallout didn't happen that day. It happened afterward, in the silence. The next morning, when I walked into the office, everything felt different. Not visually. Same gray cubicles, same stale carpet smell, same broken Keurig blinking, "Add water." But people moved around me differently. No one looked through me anymore. They looked at me. Some with respect, some with fear, some with curiosity they wouldn't dare voice. The hum of the printers, the shuffle of papers, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights, all of it carried a new frequency, as if the air itself remembered what had happened yesterday. When the elevator doors opened, 2 analysts, interns, barely 23, were inside, whispering about a client. Their voices faltered when they saw me. Their smiles stiffened. They lowered their volume as if my presence altered the rules of sound itself. Not because they thought I'd gossip with them, but because they suddenly understood I wasn't someone to gossip about. That's when I knew. What happened yesterday didn't just expose Brad. It exposed the entire system that enabled him, the old version of me. The one who stayed quiet, endured, avoided conflict because I didn't want to seem emotional or difficult in a corporate setting. She was gone. But my transformation didn't start yesterday. It started months earlier. It began the day he stole credit for my project during the Q4 meeting. I can still see it. The conference room was too cold, the kind of chill that seeps into your bones and makes you feel smaller than you already are. The glass walls reflected every movement, making it feel like we were all on display. The director was clicking through slides, client retention, policy risk analysis, Q4 projections, all of which I'd built from scratch. Every formula, every data model, every recommendation, mine. When he stopped on the slide titled Recommendation Summary, Brad leaned forward, interlocking his fingers like he was about to deliver a speech. His voice was smooth, confident, practiced. "This," he said, "is what I've been developing with my team." The words hit harder than any slap could. For a second, I thought he'd made a mistake, that he'd correct himself, mention my name, something. But no, he kept going. 12 minutes, 12 entire minutes of performance, spinning my analysis into his triumph. My breath stayed trapped in my chest. My pen hovered midair, ink bleeding into a single dark dot on the page. And the worst part wasn't his voice. It was the nodding, the murmurs of approval, the director smiling, the polite laughter, everyone buying it because it was easier than questioning him. When the meeting ended, people filed out like nothing happened. I stayed seated for a moment, staring at the reflection of the projector light fading off the glass wall. Then I followed him into the hallway. He was by the copy machine, leaning casually, like a man who had just sealed another easy win. "You crossed a line," I said quietly. He laughed, that arrogant, hollow sound that's less humor and more dismissal. "Grow up, Danielle. No one cares who typed the numbers. People care who presents them." He walked away, leaving the faint smell of cologne and toner behind him. I stood there, staring at the machine spitting out someone else's copies, and felt something shift inside me. Not rage, not even humiliation, just a cold, still awareness. I wasn't angry because he'd stolen my work. I was angry because everyone had let him. And somewhere between the pulse pounding in my ears and the ache in my chest as I sat alone in my car afterward, I decided something. If he played dirty to rise, I would play smart to win. That's when the evidence folder was born. People think revenge is rage. It wasn't. Not for me. Revenge was patience. Revenge was documentation. Revenge was discipline. It was knowing that when someone believes they're untouchable, they become predictable. Every conversation he tried to intimidate me into, recorded. Every belittling comment, screenshotted. Every time he mentored interns a little too personally, time-stamped. Not because I enjoyed it, because I refused to feel powerless again. Each piece of evidence was a brick, quietly stacked, carefully arranged. No one saw me building, but one day they'd see the wall. The slap only accelerated the timeline. I didn't walk into work today craving applause. I didn't want validation. I wasn't there to prove I was brave. I just wanted to exist without shrinking. But when I passed HR late that morning to grab a few printed reports, I heard something. Faint through the frosted glass door. Not words at first, just the rhythm of desperation. A man's voice breaking. "Brad. She set me up. She manipulated everything. She wanted this." The words stumbled, desperate, defensive. The junior HR rep's voice was calm, steady, unflinching. "Multiple women had reports against you. She just happened to be the one who proved it." I froze. The paper tray clicked behind me, spitting out forgotten copies, but all I could hear was that sentence. I wasn't supposed to hear it, but I did. And instead of triumph, I felt something else. Clarity. It wasn't about good or bad anymore. It was about balance. About truth finding a way to surface after being buried too long. That clarity stayed with me all day, through the meetings, the emails, the awkward smiles people offered me in passing. When I reached for my bag that afternoon, I heard a soft voice behind me. Danielle? Grace, one of the interns. Quiet, nervous, the kind of person who always looked like she was trying to take up less space. She hesitated, eyes flickering to the mark still faint on my cheek. Thank you, she said, voice trembling. I blinked. For what? Her gaze dropped to her shoes. For proving we weren't crazy. She didn't elaborate. She didn't have to. The thing about harassment isn't just the act itself, it's the aftermath, the questioning, the self-doubt, the quiet nights spent replaying every moment, asking yourself if maybe you imagined it, if maybe you overreacted. Her words weren't grand, but they were heavy, heavy enough to make my throat tighten. When she walked away, I sat back down for a second, staring at my screen, at the reflection of fluorescent light across its surface. For months, I'd thought I was fighting one man. But now, I understood. I was fighting a culture. When I finally left the office, the air outside smelled of cold asphalt and faint rain. I got into my car and just sat there. The sky was pale, streaked with winter clouds. A school bus rumbled past, yellow and ordinary, kids' laughter faint through the closed windows. Across the street, the Walgreens sign buzzed, one letter flickering, never quite going out. Nashville's suburbs were quiet at that hour. Too quiet. And yet, inside me, everything was loud. The silence after Brad's exit wasn't peace. It was tension shifting its shape. By the end of the week, HR had launched an internal investigation. They called it a standard compliance review, but everyone knew it was something else. People were whispering again. Not about me this time, but about him. About who else might have been involved. About who might have known. New names floated through the air like rumors carried by the HVAC vents. Women I'd never met. Women who worked on different floors. Women who suddenly started scheduling private meetings with HR. I wasn't the first. I was just the one who stopped pretending it wasn't happening. The funny thing about corporate justice is that it's always quieter than the harm that caused it. There's no dramatic music, no applause. Just paperwork, emails, the reshuffling of desks. And yet, the atmosphere felt electric, the kind of charge that comes before a storm. Because when someone powerful falls, they don't fall alone. They grab for whatever they can on the way down. And in offices like ours, power never disappears. It just looks for a new host. The rumors didn't take long to begin. I expected silence. I expected people to tread carefully, maybe avoid eye contact for a while. But the corporate world has its own currency, and gossip is the easiest form of payment. By Monday, they weren't whispering about what Brad did. They were whispering about what I did. It started as background noise. Faint voices drifting through cubicle walls, sentences that cut off when I walked by. Then came the sharper tones, the lowered heads in the elevator, the ones that think they're whispering quietly but forget how sound travels in glass buildings. In the hallway outside the elevators, I heard it first. Coworker 1. She waited for him to slip. Who does that? Coworker 2. Someone who planned it. Someone dangerous. Dangerous. The word slid beneath my skin like ice. It didn't belong to me, but somehow it fit. Too perfectly. I wasn't dangerous because I lied. I was dangerous because I told the truth. The corporate world doesn't know what to do with truth. It's messy, unprofitable, hard to control. They prefer the quiet type of compliance that smiles through discomfort and calls it professionalism. At lunchtime, I sat in my car instead of the break room. The December air had turned the steering wheel cold enough to bite my fingers. I turned on the heater, waited for it, to wheeze out lukewarm air, and stared through the windshield. Outside, coworkers moved in small clusters, laughter, coffee cups, shared sandwiches. I watched as they paired off, walking toward their cars or toward the Panera across the parking lot. No one waved. No one looked in my direction. I wasn't surprised, but noticing isolation and feeling it are two very different things. The company wasn't punishing me, the employees were. Because if someone like me could rise, quietly, strategically, then anyone could fall. By Tuesday, the tension had texture. You could feel it when you brushed against it, a hesitation in greetings, a pause in conversations when I entered a room. The office walls were thin. Every whisper sounded like a warning. 2 days later, HR called me in. The beige room smelled like printer paper and overbrewed coffee. The blinds were half open, letting in that sterile morning light that made everything feel clinical. The HR director smiled as I sat down. The kind of smile that wanted to seem empathetic but stayed 1 inch short of sincerity. "We want to thank you for coming forward," she said, her tone practiced, gentle. "You handled things responsibly." Her words landed softly, but the air felt heavy. "There's always a however." She shifted her hands on the desk, straightening a pen that didn't need straightening. "However, some employees are saying they feel unsafe around you." Unsafe. The word echoed in my mind like a foreign language. I kept my expression steady. "For reporting harassment?" "They feel," she continued carefully, "that you're collecting information on people, waiting for them to slip." I let out a quiet breath, not a sigh, more like disbelief leaving my lungs. "I collected information on one person," I said evenly, "because 3 months of reports weren't enough." The director didn't meet my eyes. She looked down at the papers on her desk, not because she disagreed, but because she couldn't afford to agree. The company wasn't afraid of what I did. They were afraid of what I proved. Silence thickened until the junior HR rep spoke, her voice hesitant. Too honest for this room. "We just want to make sure this doesn't escalate." "Meaning?" I asked. "Meaning," she said carefully. "We can't afford for the rest of the staff to start worrying that documentation might be used against them." There it was, plain, corporate. The problem wasn't misconduct. The problem was accountability. I walked out of HR slower than I walked in. Not defeated, just aware. Awareness is a quiet kind of armor. It doesn't shine, but it absorbs light and everything else that tries to pierce through. By the time I reached the parking lot, the Nashville sky had turned into a low, heavy gray, the kind that promises rain but never delivers. I sat in my car, watching clouds move slow as regret. The heater clicked, softly. For a second, I wondered if it was over, if I should just let things settle, keep my head down, pretend to blend in again. Then I checked my email. A new message. Anonymous sender. Subject line, none. I know what he did to me, too. No signature, no details, just that. Another one followed 6 minutes later from a different address. "He cornered me outside the elevator last October. I still shake thinking about it. Thank you for being brave." Then another, and another. 14 in total. Different women, different departments, different stories. Same pattern. My hands hovered above the keyboard, trembling slightly. The glow from the laptop screen painted my face blue in the reflection of the car window. The fight wasn't over, because the problem wasn't just Brad. It was the people who watched him do it and decided that staying quiet was safer. And they weren't wrong. In corporate America, silence isn't cowardice, it's survival. But now, silence was cracking. The next morning, I walked through the lobby the same way I always did. Same clothes, black slacks, beige sweater, ID clipped to the right side. No statement pieces, nothing that invited attention. But attention found me anyway. Women made eye contact, small, quick acknowledgments, a look, a nod, the faintest curve of a smile, a kind of silent Morse code. "I see you." Not every man avoided me, but the ones who used to talk with that casual superiority, the ones who stood too close or joked too freely, suddenly softened, their tones cautious, polite. That was when it hit me. I hadn't planned a movement. I had planned an ending, but maybe they were becoming the same thing. That afternoon, HR sent out a memo. Subject, workplace conduct and safety. It was neutral, polished, sterile. Employees are encouraged to come forward with any workplace concerns in a confidential setting. No mention of me. No mention of the investigation. No mention of Brad. But everyone knew. The office wasn't afraid of me. The office was afraid of their own reflection. The power wasn't in what I exposed. The power was in the possibility that I could expose more, and once a company feels watched, everything changes. But not all threats come from the top. Some come disguised as allies. That realization came Friday morning. The fluorescent lights flickered in the restroom mirror as I pushed open the door. The air smelled faintly of hand soap and lemon cleaner. Jessica was waiting. She leaned against the sink, arms crossed, posture sharp. Her lipstick was perfect, her eyes cold. "You really think you won, don't you?" she said. Her tone wasn't jealous. It was territorial, like I'd crossed into space she thought was hers. "I didn't win," I said. "I protected myself." She pushed off the counter and took a step closer. Her perfume filled the air, vanilla mixed with something bitter underneath. "Brad was awful. Everyone knows that," she said. "But now the entire company is afraid to make a move. Because of you. Because they don't want to end up in one of your little files." The words hit their mark. But not the way she intended. She wasn't defending him. She was defending the system that kept her comfortable. I stayed still, calm. "People who don't cross boundaries," I said softly, "don't need to worry about files." Her expression cracked, just slightly. Fear flickered in her eyes, quick as lightning. She turned away. "You've changed," she muttered. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I just stopped pretending." The door swung shut behind her, the echo stretching through the tiled room. I stared at my reflection. The harsh, fluorescent light made me look different, harder, maybe, or just honest. The slap was never the danger. The slap was the warning. Because when powerful men fall, the people who benefited from their power don't fall with them. They fight. The company called it a culture recalibration. That was the official phrase, polished to corporate shine, as if renaming the damage made it less visible. They brought in consultants from Atlanta, men and women in crisp suits with matching lanyards and soft, polished smiles. They spoke in slides and buzzwords. They carried binders embossed with motivational phrases and balanced their MacBooks like props. Mandatory workshops appeared on everyone's calendars overnight. Attendance required, cameras on, microphones muted, and then came the posters. Glossy, expensive posters printed in pastel tones, hands clasped, smiles mid-laugh, with words like empathy, equity, and respect curling across the paper in cursive fonts that didn't belong in a building full of exhausted people. They hung them beside vending machines no one used anymore, right next to the out-of-order sign that had been there for months. But none of it mattered, because underneath the slogans, the same conversations still lived in whispers. The same hierarchy still pulsed in the carpeted halls. The same quiet fear still dictated who spoke and who stayed silent. They didn't change the culture. They just learned to camouflage it. I kept my head down, worked quietly, finished reports, joined meetings, submitted deliverables. But I listened. The cubicle walls weren't soundproof. They never are. I heard them. The murmurs. The ones who said I'd overreacted. The ones who thought I should have handled it discreetly. The ones who whispered phrases like, "She weaponized HR," as if justice were an act of aggression. I didn't respond, not because I didn't care, but because I had already moved on to the next step. Because the slap wasn't the end of Brad's damage. It was just the moment the curtain lifted. After his termination, legal got involved. Of course they did. Men like him always find their way back through paperwork. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived at my apartment. Certified mail. Thick envelope. The kind of weight that means trouble. The seal bore the company logo in silver ink. I opened it carefully. He was filing a wrongful termination claim, alleging character defamation, accusing the firm of discrimination, rewriting the ending, as if he were the victim. But what he didn't know was that I hadn't sent everything yet. There were still files he hadn't seen. Screenshots, backups, voice memos, testimonies from women who had come forward privately, terrified, whispering through tears, but allowing me to use their words anonymously. I didn't want to fight. I wanted distance. But if he wanted to drag it into court, then so be it. I gathered everything. Organized every piece by date, department, and subject. I redacted names that needed protection, printed out digital trails that could vanish overnight, and when I was done, I attached it all to a formal affidavit addressed to the company's legal counsel. At the bottom, I typed one line in clean, centered text. If he wants to play this out in front of a judge, I'm ready. I sent it. No hesitation. They didn't respond. Not immediately. But a week later, I got the confirmation. His claim had been withdrawn. No explanation, no press release. Just gone. Not because he lost, but because he never expected me to follow through. Brad had always counted on two things: that I'd be scared and that the company would protect itself. He was wrong on both. But what no one tells you about exposing someone is that the fallout doesn't just touch them. It touches you too. My promotion was delayed for evaluation. My annual bonus was recalibrated due to budget. The client presentation I'd spent 3 months preparing for was suddenly reassigned. No one said it out loud. They didn't need to. It was punishment wrapped in policy. I didn't push back. Not yet, because I'd learned something they hadn't. Power doesn't come from titles. It comes from truth. And I still had one more card to play. 3 weeks after the slap, during the quarterly town hall meeting, they announced a new initiative, a mentorship program for junior analysts designed to elevate female talent. The irony almost made me laugh. But instead, I signed up. I was assigned 2 interns. One of them was Grace. She was quiet, focused, brilliant in small, unassuming ways. She worked through lunch breaks, never interrupted anyone, always second-guessed her own ideas before sharing them. One afternoon in January, I noticed her staring at her monitor, hands frozen above the keyboard. The office was unusually silent. Even the HVAC hum seemed distant. "You okay?" I asked. She turned slowly. Her eyes were glassy, red around the edges. "My supervisor just asked me to stay late," she said. "Alone. He said he wanted to talk about my tone during meetings." The tremble in her voice wasn't new. I'd heard it before. In others. In myself. I didn't tell her what to do. I didn't tell her to report him. I just said softly, "You get to decide what silence costs you." She stared at me for a long moment as if weighing every word. The next morning she walked into HR. Alone. And made her first report. He was spoken to. Nothing more. But when I saw her later that week, her posture was different, shoulders back, eyes steady. She walked taller. And that's when I realized my story wasn't just mine anymore. It was turning into something else. Not loud, not cinematic, quiet, deliberate. Viral in the way shame often is. It spread through whispers, through looks exchanged in hallways, through a single brave sentence at a time. One day in February, I came back from a meeting and found an envelope on my keyboard. No name, just white paper folded neatly. Inside, a typed note. "She stole my story. I rewrote the ending." I looked around. No one was watching me, but someone had seen me, and for the first time, I felt something deeper than victory. Legacy. But the company still hadn't learned, because just when I thought things were settling, they blindsided me. March 2nd, a Friday. I was called into a meeting with senior management, 4 people in suits, 1 glass table, 1 printed report. They smiled the way people do before delivering bad news wrapped in civility. "There's been a culture disruption," one said. "We've noticed division among teams," another added. "Despite your strong performance, we're restructuring your role," said the third. I knew what that meant. Restructuring, recalibration, realignment. All words that mean the same thing: removal. I was being let go. No warning. No write-up. Just a clean, legally sound dismissal. I didn't cry. Didn't argue. I asked for the severance terms in writing, gathered my things, and walked out. Outside, it was raining. Hard. Tennessee spring rain, the kind that feels like it's washing something away. The air smelled like wet cement and clean leaves. The sky was silver gray, heavy with thunder that never came. I stood under the overhang, envelope in hand, watching the rain streak down the parking lot lights until the world blurred. They thought they won. They thought the slap had been reversed. But they forgot something. I had copies of everything, not just Brad's behavior, but theirs. The delay in response, the memo that promised safety but delivered silence, the delayed promotion, the budget recalibration, the client presentation that disappeared, the retaliation packaged as restructuring. I had it all, and this time I didn't send it to HR. I sent it to the press. The article dropped on a Tuesday. It wasn't front page news. It didn't break the internet. It didn't trend or spark a viral outrage cycle. It was quieter than that, but sometimes quiet hits harder. A local investigative blog ran it first, slapped twice. How one Nashville woman exposed a culture of corporate retaliation. They didn't use my real name. They didn't have to. The details were clear enough, too specific to ignore, too familiar to dismiss. The kind of story that burrowed under people's skin because they'd seen versions of it before, in their own offices, at their own meetings, behind their own closed doors. Within 48 hours, it was picked up by 3 larger outlets, the kind that had glossy layouts and cautious editors. They reached out to the company for comment, and in return got the same polished statement everyone expected. We take all employee concerns seriously and are committed to creating a safe and inclusive workplace. But behind the scenes, things began to unravel. The CEO sent a memo to staff by sunrise the next morning. Corporate language wrapped around panic. We are conducting a thorough internal review to ensure accountability. By midweek, the firm announced a third-party audit, and before the week ended, 2 senior managers, both men who'd quietly defended Brad months earlier, had stepped down. And then, on Friday, an email arrived in my inbox. Not from HR, not from legal, from the board. It was long, formal, and filled with words that had been softened by lawyers. But between the lines, I could read what it really said. We're scared. They offered a formal apology, a financial settlement, and, the part that made me pause, a consulting role. They said they were rebuilding trust and wanted me to help shape the very culture I had exposed. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I didn't know how to respond, but because I did. I closed the email. I didn't reply. Because I wasn't interested in cleaning up the mess they'd pretended not to see. I wasn't coming back to fix a culture they only cared about once it was public. Instead, that night, I opened LinkedIn and wrote one sentence. She smiled like I was the joke. I made sure I was the punchline instead. I hit post and closed my laptop. By morning, it had gone viral. Hundreds of reactions. Then, thousands. Comments from women in cities I'd never been to. Seattle, Chicago, Atlanta, rural Kentucky. Women who'd seen the same kind of silence, worn the same polite smiles, heard the same coded warnings to pick your battles. Some messages were short, thank you. Some were stories. I've been there. Some were angry, defiant, proud. But all of them understood. I didn't ask for that slap in the break room. I didn't orchestrate it. But when it came, I refused to let it define me. I used it. Because the truth is, I had already rebuilt myself long before his hand met my face. The story was never about the slap. It was about everything that came before it, the 1,000 tiny humiliations that people pretend don't count, the meetings where my ideas were repeated by someone else and applauded, the interns who vanished quietly after mentorship talks, the side eyes in the hallway, the labels, difficult, intense, emotional. That slap just made the invisible visible, and once something's visible, it can't be unseen. A year later, I run my own firm. It's small, just me, a desk I assembled myself, and a coffee table covered in handwritten notes. My office smells like fresh paper and lavender candles, not fear. My clients are startups, nonprofits, small companies that believe in fairness over fear. I help them build cultures that don't need slogans to prove they care about people. Grace interned with me last summer. She's thriving now. Sharp, confident, a little sarcastic. The version of herself she used to apologize for being. Sometimes, over coffee, we joke about that old office. How it smelled like stale coffee and control. How the air always felt thick with unspoken things. How we used to count ceiling tiles in meetings just to keep from making eye contact. We laugh now. But underneath it, there's something else. Gratitude. Not for what happened, but for what came after. I don't miss that building. I don't miss the gray carpets or the blinking Keurig or the quiet cruelty that passed for professionalism. Because I learned something there that no paycheck or promotion could have taught me. Silence doesn't protect you, it just delays the fallout. And when it comes, it hits harder. I didn't ruin him. I didn't destroy a career. I just stopped protecting him from the consequences of his own actions. He slapped me in front of everyone, so I let everyone watch him fall. And now, every time I walk into a room, any room, I walk in knowing one thing. If they're scared of what truth looks like on paper, they should have behaved better when they thought no one was watching. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.